Hello.
Hello.
Hi, everyone. We are off camera tonight because of some technological difficulties with internet, and we're hoping that being off camera really helps Lara to be able to stay in the room with us. Anyone who was here with us the last time Lara joined us, you'll know exactly what we mean. So yeah, it's wonderful to have you here with us. You're not on camera. You're not on audio. You have a chat box to the right of you if you are on a laptop, and there's a little button if you're on a phone so that you can open the chat box and type in any questions or comments in there. This session is being recorded and it will be sent out as a replay after the session. What else? Oh, if the worst does happen and Lara does get taken away today because don't worry, we have a backup plan. We are going to record the session and then send it out if that should happen, just to pre-warn you. So I will hand over to Lara now, and Stacey and I will disappear off of the stage for a moment.
Everyone.
Good question, Hayley. How do I do that?
Bottom right button, Stacey.
I get it. Thank you. Right, bye, everyone.
Thank you, ladies. It's a really kind introduction, and thanks to everyone for coming back after the tech debacle we had last week. So this is the follow-on session from that. So I'll do a very quick recap of what we talked about before, because some of you may have heard it already. I'll also just introduce myself very, very quickly. So as Hayley said, I am Lara Hayward. I'm a career coach predominantly for Oxford University. I also do some private career coaching. I started my career as a lawyer, where I very much had to wear an extrovert mask, and I finally flung that off in 2016, thank goodness, to pursue work that really gave me fulfillment and where I was able to be myself. And that's really what's led me to doing this kind of work today. So I really understand where some of you are coming from in terms of careers and work, and I really get what it feels like to go into a world of work that feels like it's set up for extroverts. And I hope that some of these sort of tips and tricks and just learnings from my own experience will kind of help you in the workplace. Do feel free to pop any questions that you have, anything relating to work or feelings or anything you'd like to talk through into the chat box. It's always great to hear from people about their experiences, and it really helps just sort of guide the session and make it more personal. So with that, I'm just going to do a very quick recap of the session we ran last week. And really that was about really trying to find out, who you are as a person and what makes you tick, and start with you and the type of work that you want to do rather than just looking for a job description. It's about valuing introversion, valuing your quietness, valuing how you like to work and the skills and strengths you bring to any work that you do, and really tapping into that before you go out to look for work, because that will give you a much clearer idea of where you're a good fit and where you'll be valued and where you'll feel valued. I know Hayley has the slides and all of the workbooks and the recording of that session. So if you like some ideas about how to do that, to get under the skin of what your values are, how you'd like to work, what your skills are, where you felt comfortable in work before, there's some really good tools in the previous session and in a PDF document that Hayley's put together. So do seek those out, have a work through and have a look at those documents, because they'll give you a good kind of sense of who you are and where you might like to look for work. And again, as I say, it's a very brief recap. So if you've got any questions about any of that, do pop them in the chat box. So I'm now just going to flick through a number of these slides because they were the presentation from last week. And we'll get to the second part of the presentation. So there we go. I'm just going to hover on that slide. That's some of the workbooks and the sort of tasks that you can use to look at your values and your skills and your qualities and how you might bring them into the workplace. But as I said, that will come through in a follow-up document afterwards. Okay, so quiet in the workplace. I think it is safe to say that whether it's something that we feel or it's something that's true, it's that the workplace, certainly pre-COVID, felt very, very much set up for extroverts or people who are happy with the sound of their own voice, people who are happy to be loud. You know, whether you're in an open plan office or in meetings all the time, that environment tends to suit people who are comfortable being around a lot of people and a lot of noise. Although, you know, sometimes those people, I think, would sort of prefer quieter environments too. And I think that's one of the first things to sort of have in mind, is that, you know, what we might be feeling about being in noisy workplaces, a lot of other people are feeling too. And to some degree, everyone, even the extroverts, is kind of putting on some kind of front in the workplace. And I think if we know that, that can kind of help us certainly move away from any more negative feelings that we might have about being a bit different or not fitting in or really struggling. So that's sort of like the overarching, I think, thing to remember. And I mentioned it, I think, last week, but it's a comment that somebody said to me, and it's really stuck in my mind, that when extroverts are kind of affronted about people being quiet, it's because they see it as reflecting on them, you know, so they're wondering, you know, have I said the wrong thing? Or, you know, why is this person being quiet? You know, they're thinking about how it reflects on them, rather than sort of judging you for being quiet, even though that might be how it feels at the time. And I think it's just helpful to remember that everyone sort of has their own individual struggle going on, and certainly in the workplace, where I think a lot of what we do is quite performative. So I think these are just some sort of, again, overarching tips before we get into a little bit more information about how you might deal with specific things like presentations or networking and that kind of thing. So the first tip there, like, really, really know yourself and your worth, because if you can get to know yourself, and that can be a long process, and it's a sort of constant checking in with where you're happy, where you feel safe, where you feel secure. If you know that, you can use that in any interactions in the workplace. And an example of that would be, I think, from my own experience, when I was a lawyer, there was certainly a sort of attitude that you had to be on all the time. So replying to emails instantaneously, if you're in a meeting and people are saying stuff, I really felt like I needed to say something, even though I knew I didn't have anything particular to contribute to that conversation. I think that's because I was working in the field of litigation as well, where it is about sort of arguing cases. So the environment sort of generates that. And what I noticed when I was working in that environment was that I was constantly exhausted. And I think a lot of that was from me sort of performing, you know, saying more than what I would, being around people all the time, being in quite an argumentative environment. And I think I always knew on some level that wasn't where I should be. When I finally sort of did a lot of work to get to know my values, get to know the skills I wanted to work in, you know, really tuning into the environments where I felt like I could do good work, that cemented in my mind that law wasn't the right place. And I realized that I was much better working one-on-one with people. I like working in people development, supporting them to become sort of more confident, secure in work and themselves. And that's how I ended up doing careers work. And the difference now is, so if I'm in a meeting now, and it still happens in the career service, we have a number of big personalities. They tend to take over meetings, but I don't feel like I have to say something just for the sake of it. And what I've learned to do is, often it takes me a lot longer to process information, to think about what I want to do, how I want to respond, and sort of present my ideas. So I will either email afterwards, or I'll have a chat with a person one-to-one and say, this is my reflection on the meeting, I just like to present this. And that means that I'm comfortable with it. I can present my ideas in a way that they're sort of as clear as possible. And I'm also, you know, working with people in a way that works for me. And I think by doing that, also my colleagues can now see that that's how I like to work. And as I say, that's going to be different for individuals. It's going to be very specific to you and your specific circumstances. But I think if you value how you like to work, then you can start bringing that into work and start sort of hopefully showing other people how you like to be worked with, and then they will learn, and it becomes more of a conversation, and people just respecting each other's differences. And I know that can feel really hard when you're going into a new workplace and you feel like everyone's doing the same thing. So it takes quite a lot of, I suppose, strength or courage in it, but that can be quiet courage, to sort of stick to what you need. And I think that's what a lot of being an introvert in the workplace is about. And I think to do that, it's using one of the strongest ways to do that, I think, or one of the most helpful ways, is to work out where your allies are and your support networks are. And that could be people, it could be practices that you put in place. It could be things that you do to get that sense of calm or sense of sort of empowerment to go on and sort of do either a difficult task or have a conversation or whatever it might be. But what I found, certainly in work, I feel like I have a couple of allies, one of whom's an extrovert, one is an introvert. So when I'm sort of struggling with getting my point across, I will speak to both of them, and that has really helped me. So just sort of airing that, but also being really honest about what you're feeling and what you need with somebody who you feel can support you. That enables that strength, and it enables sort of engaging in the workplace in a better way. And Hayley and I were having a conversation actually before this workshop, saying, that could be something that sort of Quiet Connections, that you're all part of this amazing network of people who understand these things. Can you, if you're going to an interview or you've got a difficult meeting coming up, can you raise it in the app, in any of the groups that you're connected with, and just see if anyone is there to support, or just let them know that you're doing it, so that people are tuned in and can kind of support you in that way. And those sorts of things become, I think, really helpful, because the more you know that there are other people out there and other people are having similar struggles and trying to overcome them, there's strength in that alone. So that's a really important thing. Finding an extrovert ally has been absolutely just sort of amazing for me, but also I realize that a lot of this work, I follow Simon Sinek, or Simon Sinek, so his surname is Sinek. I've linked to a number of his resources in the group. He is a motivational speaker, I think you'd call him now. He's got millions of followers, has written a very influential book called Find Your Why. And he is a self-proclaimed introvert, and he talks about, there's a link to a video which I've included in the materials, and I wanted to show it in here, but the slides wouldn't quite work. But he, in this video, why he's talking about introverts as leaders, and why really valuing your introversion and bringing that into work is important, is he said that basically, if you're going along to a networking meeting, bring an extrovert along, because they can go and do all the talking while he eats all the cheese, and which I just thought was brilliant, because I realized I've done that before. I go along with a more sort of extroverted friend, and this can apply online and offline as well. And they sort of do all the chit chat, where I sort of skirt the room and then find the one person that I want to talk to. So do you have any friends or people within work or outside of work who are happy doing the talky stuff, so you can almost operate as a pair in those situations? That can be a sort of a great empower and really uplifting as well, because you're working as a team in the communication setting, which is fantastic. I think the other thing which I'm really excited about, and what we've all seen, is that lockdown has brought sort of a number of new opportunities and ways for people to connect and communicate in the workplace. And I think the online forum, doing stuff in Teams or Zoom or platforms like Demio, it's enabled people to communicate, so using the chat box or in different ways, without feeling like they're in the spotlight and putting them under that pressure. And I think we will see lots of changes. We're already starting to see it with flexible working. So some roles that might have taken sort of more energy for quieter people, as in because you're having to do a big commute, that required lots of face-to-face communication, lots of that work can now be done online and in different ways. So I think it's just a good idea to be aware of those new opportunities that might be coming out there, or work that you might want to do that might have felt a little bit scary before? Has it shifted? Has it modified? And is there now a place for you to be able to do that in a way that feels right for you? So I think that's just a sort of a note or a marker to think about new opportunities and new things that might be arising out of this current situation. So what we've learned at Oxford, a number of sort of quick tips really that students have reflected back to us, and we found them really useful in working in some of our broader or wider groups. I think if you are working online, or if you're thinking about interviews online, anything like that, there's been a lot of research into the fact that when we are looking at ourselves all day, which is something that we never had to do before, it can make us very tired, because the majority of people, extroverts, introverts, are very self-critical. It's a really strange thing to sort of look at yourself and notice all of your quirks and how your face moves, or any sort of foibles you have. I know I play with my hair all the time, which is a sort of nervous reaction, and you start seeing them, and that's exhausting for our brain to sort of manage when it's something we haven't had to do before. So Zoom certainly has a hide self-view function. My understanding is that Teams are also doing that. So that's something that you can use if you find that quite difficult. And I think once you do it over a period of time, it does seem to make the time online much quieter. So that's something, certainly, I think if you're having video interviews, and it's something you might want to think about, certainly speaking to the interviewer about and saying that you're going to do that if you find it difficult. But that's something that students have also said that they found much more useful when they're in that kind of online forum and situation. It's also perfectly okay to say that you would rather use a chat box to reply if you come into a situation, if there's lots of sort of video online meetings. I'm seeing that from a lot of people, some colleagues. You guys do it really well here in Quiet Connections already, and I love that actually you prefer to use the chat box. And we have a number of students as well who have sort of communication difficulties because of disabilities or unseen disabilities that they might have, and they've said that they've just found that hugely useful. And I think that is playing into a wider conversation about accessibility across the workplace, which I hope will make more people, more employers alive to these types of issues as well. So if that's something that you find useful and it really helps you engage in the workplace, then don't be afraid to say it, because I think the more voices that we add to that conversation, the stronger that message will be, that different types of people like to communicate in different ways, and then that facilitates more comfort in the workplace and more respect for different people's ways of working. The other thing that we've come across, and I think it is that online platform that has perhaps given people the confidence to say things that they wouldn't necessarily say if you're in a big sort of verbal conversation, is if you are sort of involved in a conversation or a training session or any kind of opportunity online, and people ask for questions, and I know I've sort of done that at the start, and we'll probably do it at the end. It's okay to email questions afterwards, if you need more time. And I actually do that, something I practice quite frequently, because I do a lot of training for work. And often I'm sort of thinking about questions during the session, but either can't quite formulate them there and then. But I've got into a practice of, if there is a question I want to ask and I'm thinking about it, then I just follow up afterwards. You may not always get a reply, but again, it's a great practice to get into, because it builds your confidence in being able to say the things that you need or ask the questions that you want to ask. And I would say that's a larger kind of practice to get into for the workplace more broadly. So I think it's okay to ask in, and I think quite often we think, oh, I missed the opportunity to ask the questions, or I should have asked it then, or I wish I wasn't so quiet. But it's actually totally okay to ask it in a different way and a bit later on. Particularly if you're talking to people who are experts in something, they love being asked questions about what they do. So never feel like it's a bad thing to follow up later if you weren't able to ask your question at that particular time. And as I say, that's valuable for the workplace, particularly if we're engaging in conversations with bosses or in big team meetings, because I think in most situations it will always be the loudest voices that get heard first. And there's actually a lot of people probably in the middle, as well as people who are much more quieter. like us, like the people in the room, who sort of don't get their say. And I think lockdown, more online working, it's facilitating different ways to have these conversations. So that's just something to think about as well. And then the final point is find allies. And as I say, use QC, use friends in the workplace, use family, just people who enable you to feel like you can do things. You know, who enables you to feel sort of strong. When do you feel at your best? And think about who those people are and what those situations are, and then employ them if you're going into difficult situations in the workplace. Okay, so I think when we were putting this workshop together, and Hayley had sent me a lot of sort of information and material about things that people had mentioned in previous workshops and interviews, I think are always a tricky one for people who feel or either have sort of social anxiety or just feel like they're on the spot. And I think that's the case. I think that's the case even if people feel relatively confident. It's always scary to do these things. You know, everyone has that feeling like they're on the spot and are worried about how they're going to kind of perform, I suppose, or how they're going to engage. And because we have all that fear that we bring with us from previous situations and things that we've gone into that perhaps haven't gone so well, or we perceive that they haven't gone so well. So I think, again, a lot of it applies. And that first point there where I've said apply for jobs that suit you and your skills, it's really a self-care practice as much as anything else. It's about valuing what you can bring to a workplace and not trying to shoehorn yourself into a role that doesn't necessarily suit you. So I think the more you kind of apply for jobs that suit you, hopefully the less stressful the interviews will be, because you'll be talking about things that you're passionate about. You'll be, you know, really amplifying those skills that enable you to do that role, and it becomes less scary. I think that lots of anxiety can come from trying to do things that sort of ultimately on some level we don't want to do, or that don't sort of accord with our values. And I see that a lot actually at Oxford, and the more aligned someone can get with the roles that they like to do. And I think there's a great comment that came back from the first session of this, the lady who realized that she'd been really happy when she was working at a florist's and, you know, with nature and creating sort of beautiful things. And that's, you know, just really great sort of insight and knowledge as to some of the skills and types of environment that person really liked working in. And you can transfer that to other work situations and scenarios. So hopefully you're always looking at jobs that, you know, are really suited to you. So that's something, again, I would really underline as a value, and throughout your entire working life. I think that's something to work on, something that we're all working on all the time, getting closer to work that's sort of in alignment with our values. The next step is probably an obvious one, but really, really thorough preparation. So research the organization that you're applying to thoroughly. Look on LinkedIn for people who are working there or in the team that you're applying to, see what their sort of backgrounds are. Make sure you know any application that you've submitted inside out. Again, I know this all sounds really basic, but it's just really good to be reminded of it, because if you know your application inside out and everything on that is sort of honest and truthful, that generally forms the basis of any interview. So you're not going to be caught out the better that you know it. And if it is just, once you get into that situation, being able to answer in the moment, that's where that practice element again comes into play. And I think either speaking with a friend, speaking with a career coach, working with other members of Quiet Connections, see if somebody will give you a sort of mock practice interview, and that can be scary itself, you know. But it gets you used to it, sort of conditions you to sort of that interview environment, and will give you a sense of what it might feel like and allow you to practice through it. Because I think a lot of these things, certainly that generate anxiety, the way through them is to take baby steps to get more comfortable with them, and that can be quite a long process, but it can also be quite an empowering process. And the key is to just keep practicing, but within the realms of what feels safe for you. So, you know, work with somebody you really trust to ask you those questions, ask you questions about your CV and your application and the job role, and see how that goes. Maybe that bit's okay, maybe it's really scary, but then you're able to identify what it is about it that's scary and then work on that particular bit. And maybe some of it goes well, and that hopefully will give you some confidence in certain areas. And exactly as Hayley and Stacey have said there, it is about stretching your comfort zone, but in a way that feels safe. So you don't need to jump right off the deep end. And I've tried that approach before, and usually backfires. Take it in small steps that work for you. So you're gradually building that comfort zone, and you're gradually building your skills and exposure to that kind of environment. The third one, Dan, is super, super important. And I think I've only realized recently how often people don't do this. I think given as well that there's going to be an increase in online interviews, and we're seeing that happening across all sorts of sector. And I think until COVID is completely sort of under control, as far as that's possible, online interviews are going to be a really normal thing. And it's incredibly important to let the recruiter know if you have any specific needs. And that could be many things. It doesn't necessarily need to be a defined sort of disability or something like that. But again, as another example, my sister, who she would say she's introverted, but she's relatively confident in interview situations. But she has facial paralysis from a medical condition that she had when she was younger. So she finds video interviews particularly distressing, and she doesn't like thinking about how she looks on screen. And she will always let the interviewer know before, because she knows it impacts how she communicates in the moment. So she will tell them so that they are forewarned about that, and that if she then has any sort of difficulties communicating in the interview because of that, because of her sort of self-consciousness around it, they're therefore sort of forearmed with that knowledge, and they know to allow for it. And I think that's particularly important certainly if you have social anxiety, if you have that sort of aspect and those concerns, it's perfectly appropriate to let the interviewer know about that. And I think the majority of good employers will take that into account and understand that people sort of struggle with it. But again, it's about using your voice, hopefully in a way that feels safe, to let them know what your needs are and to let them know how you might be affected in that interview situation. And again, the practice of speaking up for your own needs, I think, is empowering, and it lends itself to having more confident conversations at work. When you're in an interview, and I know lots of people get caught out with this, I think even if they feel more confident, if you are asked a question that you get stuck on, that you feel like you can't answer, really just try and take a few deep breaths and take a sort of step back from the question. Use any kind of enabler that allows you a bit more time. Again, it is perfectly okay to say to an interviewer, I need a bit of time to think about that, and then take that time. If you're really stuck, and I've had people say this to me, and I thought it was brilliant when they said it. They said, I'm a little bit stuck on that question. Can I come back to it at the end? And I thought that was a really great way of dealing with it, and it felt perfectly reasonable. So again, and I know all of these things require using our voices, but they're quite safe. They're quite small ways to just build confidence in our needs and values in those particular situations, whilst also engaging with what the interviewer requires. And that's a great comment there in the chat, that it's a brilliant way of sussing out who you want to work with, and how, because I think that's the other thing with interviews. I noticed this a lot too, that I think most of us, certainly when we start in the workplace or we start in an interview situation, we feel it's about impressing an interviewer and being the person that they want us to be, whereas an interview is always a two-way conversation. You are sussing them out as much as they are sussing you out. And as Stacey says, it really is a wonderful point. And I think if we can remember that actually takes some of the pressure off as well, and it feels less scary, because you want to go to work at a place where you feel comfortable, someone who really, really values who you are and values the skills that you can bring. And if you go into a workplace and you don't get that sense from a recruiter, you don't get that kind of rapport building from somebody, I would always say question, if you want to work there, because it really is a two-way thing. And the best working relationships, I think, always come from when you've had that two-way sense in an interview, when somebody is as interested in you as you are in them, because that builds the foundations for a really good working relationship. So thank you for raising that, Team QC. It's a brilliant, brilliant point. And again, I use this point a lot, so sorry if it feels like I'm repeating myself. But who are your support buddies? Can somebody, whether it's a video interview or a face-to-face interview, is there somebody who can be there for you just before or bring you a cup of tea afterwards? Can you mention it online in QC, saying, I'm going to this, I'm really nervous. Has anyone got any tips? And I think just sharing that or speaking it out loud or online, that anxiety dissipates it slightly, sharing it with another person. So really do think who your team are, who your squad is for interviews and any other scary work situations. Giving presentations. Now, I know this one filled me with dread for years and years and years and years. And in the last workshop that I ran, I talked about a number of occasions, both before becoming a lawyer and during a lawyer, when anytime I had to give any kind of presentation, I would either avoid it or break down in tears in the middle of it and run out of the room crying. And it just became this huge, horrible thing for me. And I think one of the changes, aside from moving into work that I really valued, it was hearing from, I was at a lecture, I think it might have been at the Royal Society of Medicine, and the chap who was giving a speech ran his own company doing life-saving training, so St John's Ambulance type stuff, really interesting. And he had a background, he was quite senior in the military, but he was actually talking about leadership. And it was fascinating to me because, from his bio, you would have just assumed huge extrovert. But he actually ended up talking about when he was in the military, he hated giving presentations. He was always sort of one of the quieter ones. And in that environment, just never felt like he fitted in. And then he had this wonderful story how he came to start his life-saving company. Because of his military training, he was walking down the street at some point, and there was actually somebody who needed medical care and life-saving, and he went over, he performed CPR, put them in the recovery position, and they survived. And that was the catalyst for him starting this business. And he said it was also the catalyst for him being a comfortable public speaker, because he realized that he was finally talking about something that he really cared about. And he felt like he could talk about that with flow, with lots of sort of courage, with loads of sort of anecdotes, because he just really cared. Whereas when he was doing stuff in the military, it wasn't aligned with his values. And when I heard him speak, that just really, really resonated with me, because I think when I was a lawyer, I just didn't have that connection to the work I was doing, and certainly not litigation. It just felt very argumentative. It wasn't sort of solutions focused. It wasn't really focused with people in mind and making things better. So that always sat with me, and now I really understand that, because at Oxford now, certainly pre-COVID, I was giving presentations on a daily basis to sort of 70 to 100 people. And then I mentioned last week that I opened a big event at the Ashmolean, and I was sort of stood really kind of high on a stairwell overlooking 450 people, including my boss and other kind of scary, important people. And if somebody had told me 4 years ago that I would have done that, there is absolutely no way I could have envisaged that happening. And the key change was talking about something that I cared about. So I think, really think about that. What do you care about? Where do you do your best work? And I think really great public speaking, if that's something that you may need to do in work, can come from there. Because when you talk about things you love to family and friends, everyone probably has a much more sort of confident voice and really sort of fluent and just enthusiastic. And that comes through, I think, when we're talking about things that we love. The first point there, which really builds on from there, is give presentations, you know, as an introvert, be your introverted self and unapologetically. And I love that. And I think I got that from one of the resources that's also in the handout that Hayley will send over afterwards. And what I mean by that is really bring yourself into any presentation. And I think, again, Simon Sinek is really good on this, because he talks about the skills and qualities he has an introvert. Means he really likes talking to people one-on-one. So if he's giving a bigger presentation, he will actually address people one-on-one, even if it's a big room of people. And that has the sort of dual effect of those people, that group of people, really feel like they're being listened to, because he sort of makes eye contact with them. And it takes the pressure off him, because he's not looking at a whole room. He will focus on individuals as he's going around. And I think that makes presentations less scary. It's a step to build up to if this is an area that's really difficult for you. And I really get it, because it was the biggest, scariest area for me for a long time. But it's thinking about, so again, it's tuning back into what you need. When are you able to speak well with other people? When are you kind of happy in those kind of situations? And then you want to try and emulate that as far as you can in a situation. Moving on down, again, that tuning in point is really important. What is the bit about presentations that causes you stress? Is it the number of people in the audience? Is it the pressure from a boss to deliver something that you feel like you don't know enough about? Is it the topic? Is it the actual sort of articulation of it? And if you can identify those bits, it enables you to start working on them in a way that's right for you. Think about, are there other ways to deliver the session? Does it have to be done in person? Can it be done online? Can you work with another person on it? And that's something I actually did at the career service when I started. I think, and I only had, it was a presentation to about 15 people, I think. And I actually worked with a colleague on it, because I said, I don't feel quite confident enough to deliver this on my own. Are you happy to sort of be there as support? And what we found in doing that, it actually created a kind of nicer rapport often for the audience, and sort of more engagement. It became much more conversational rather than a sort of chalk and talk presentation. So really good things came out of it. And I think that was from coming from, or having the confidence to say, I'm not quite confident enough to deliver this just me on my own because I feel too new. Is there a way that we can work on it together? So again, you're kind of stretching your comfort zone, but using really baby steps and building on it. And those could be different for every person. So think about what's the most stressful aspect of it for you. And are there ways to prepare that enable you to feel safer within it? And I think the last points on there's just a couple of tips. If you can, I mean, if somebody springs something on you at work, and you really aren't ready for it, I mean, sometimes it's a question for you. Is this going to be a really good thing to do? Is it going to stretch me in a way I want to be stretched? Or is it just absolutely terrifying and I really don't want to do it? And if you feel yourself kind of stuck in that place where it feels paralyzing because you're not quite sure what's the right thing to do, have a chat to the person who's sort of given it to you, and just raise your kind of concerns and see if they're willing to work with you on it. And again, it's practicing using your voice, practice in sort of articulating your needs in a workplace, and seeing if they can be modified in a way that works better for everyone. That may not always happen, and that's the tricky thing. And often work brings us stuff that we don't want to do. But I think the first step is always identifying your needs and then trying to work with them, and then perhaps speaking to an ally if you feel like you're not supported in that space. Other, I think, great ways, and I sort of asked around at work about what people have done to sort of help prepare themselves for presentations. Practicing is always good. If it's terrifying to practice in front of another person, record yourself online. So presentation like this, think of something you want to talk about, speak to your computer, record yourself on your phone, play it back. Because sometimes it actually might not be as bad as what you think it is, and there'll probably be some stuff that you love in there. And it's just a really good way of just practicing speaking out loud. So start on your own first and just see how it goes, see what comes up, see what you feel. And the next step on from that is ask to practice in front of people you can trust, get their feedback. Again, it's really important though to work with people who are very supportive and can deliver feedback in a really constructive and helpful way. But again, that's really valuable, and that's something that I did when I started work at the Career Service, is to sort of start small and then gradually build it up. Again, stretching that comfort zone in a really sort of practical and safe way. And then that last point just reiterates: think about what you know and love and deeply care about, and then that might be a first step. Recording yourself talking about that to your phone or to someone else, and just seeing what comes up. Like, really think about presenting it, because it's something that you love. I think you'll surprise yourself in how you deliver it. And if you think about it, certainly that's why I've come into this type of work. You know, I really care about it, and I'm sort of trying to value my quietness and introversion and bring that into the workshops I deliver. That's how Quiet Connections came about. And that's what I love. You know, that's when these great things are created, because people have really connected with their values and they want to help other people in that space. So I would say, you know, in the workplace, and if you're seeking work or if you're already in a role, what are those things that you feel like you might be able, you know, you want to change or you want to get involved in, or who do you want to work with? Can you take steps to moving towards that place, or working on new projects or things that are more aligned with your skills and values? And if you can, if it feels right, start speaking up about them, start making connections within work to see if you can kind of shift into that area. Because if you feel more comfortable in it, then all of these skills, these sort of work-related skills like presentations, interviews, networking, they become a little bit easier, or they start to feel a bit easier. And then finally, we've got networking, which we haven't been doing much of this in the normal kind of format over the last year. And I think, you know, when most people think about networking, it's just, I mean, I just always used to roll my eyes and sort of groan, because it was certainly in the legal sector, it was a lot of small talk, a lot of people in suits, a lot of people just, you know, showboating or there just for the wine. And that, you know, that's all completely valid, but it often felt like a waste of time and or really quite exhausting. But again, I think this is changing. I think we're actually running a lot of networking events and careers fairs and things online, and seeing a bit of a change in the way people communicate. It's allowing space for people who are more comfortable chatting online to have a voice in those conversations. But I think, again, one of the main things is networking is a bit of a horrible word as well. I mean, when I was trying to find slides for this, I typed in networking and I got lots of pictures or images of, you know, wires crossed out the back of computers and things just being a big old mess and really quite stressful. And it was actually great, because I think that's how it feels. But I think if we think of networking, so like Quiet Connections, you know, it's meaningful connections with people who you want to speak to, people who you've got stuff to learn from. And relationships that can really build value in your own life. So I think if we think of networking more like meaningful connections, again, that will help us go to those networking events or those online events that actually really matter to us and can actually help and support us in work and developing career paths. I think other ways to think about networking, so certainly if you're exploring your career options at the moment, LinkedIn is a great resource, and just getting comfortable sending messages to people who are doing the type of work you want to do, who are in careers that you might want to explore. And we're seeing a lot of this, and I think people are really happy to receive messages and sort of get replies. You know, if you send out really kind of interesting, kind of courteous emails just saying, I'm really interested in what you do, would you be happy to have a bit of a chat about it, because I'm exploring that as an option. We're seeing people network in inverted commas in that way, but really what you're doing is building your connections in a space that you might want to work into. And also, I think actually it's really nice for people to hear that you're interested in what they do, and I think that opens people up to speaking as well. We think back to sort of in-person networking. I don't think this is going to be happening en masse for a while, but I know it's what a lot of people feel quite stressed about. You know, don't feel you have to speak to everyone. I think it's really good to identify perhaps one or two people who you're genuinely interested in speaking to, and try and find them. That again takes the pressure off. Don't feel like you have to sort of network a whole room. It's also totally okay if you want to go and hide in the toilet for a break. You know, lots of people do that. They really do. Or they'll go and eat food. I know that's what I do. And that's totally okay, because what you're doing really is managing your energy, and you're making these big group situations in the workplace more manageable and work for you. There's lots of information about, I think lots of people struggle with how to get into a group networking. So if people are sort of clustered together, how do you join a conversation? And there's lots about, you know, go and join people who are in threes, or who are sort of standing in a formation where they're slightly more open. So it's easier to sort of come in and, you know, just say hello, or sort of sidle up. The other thing that I used to do, and it's a great tip that somebody gave me, if you go into a sort of networking room and you're feeling not confident, perhaps look for another person who's on their own and join them, because chances are they might be feeling the same as you and quite nervous about speaking to other people. And again, you know, you can often find a connection there, because they'll be really happy that somebody sort of broke that silence. And, you know, again, it's a time, I think, when it's a really good thing to say, oh, you know, find networking a bit tough, or, you know, and you'll probably connect over that. Again, it's about valuing your needs, valuing yourself as an introvert, valuing the way you communicate, and not thinking that it's somehow less than extroversion or being super confident. It's exactly, you know, they're on a par. And I think us introverts, us quieter people, really need to value what that brings, and sort of stand strong in it, really. Simon Sinek, again, who I know I've referred to a lot, and lots of the other sort of literature research around this is use your strengths as an introvert. So listen to people, and actually it's sort of, it can be really nice, you know, if you find someone who's interesting. I love just listening to interesting people talk, and that's networking in itself. You know, I mean, you don't want to stand there listening to people who are just sort of draining or not finding anything useful. But then, you know, as an introvert, we're all quite good at sort of slinking away and finding somebody who is. So that's great. And again, if you feel like you can't join the conversation there and then, this is where it becomes a really good idea to catch up with that person afterwards, either LinkedIn or email, or if it's an online chat, just find a way to connect with them afterwards and keep that conversation going in a way that feels comfortable for you. So again, just tune in the moment, what feels right. I also know that I have, and some of my colleagues have sort of practiced sort of networking by doing that, by just giving themselves almost a challenge of asking one question in that kind of session, or speaking to one person in a networking session. And again, it's building up those skills, navigating the workplace in small ways. And the more you kind of build on those small steps, the more confidence that you will get. And then the last point there, if you can take an extrovert along, that's great, because they can do all the talking and you can just sort of hang with them and find the people that you want to speak to. And I know I say that sort of slightly humorously, but it actually works really well. And it just feels nice to go along with the person if you can. Okay, so I mean, they're the end of my slides on those sort of three key areas. And I thought I'd focus on them because they tend to be the ones that are the most problematic. Certainly what I see working with people in the Oxford community. So I've got plenty of time for questions. So if there's anything that anyone would like to ask, or anything that I haven't discussed, and I'm sure there's lots of that, please put it in the chat. I'm really happy to take questions. And thank you all for listening. I think, Hayley, I might risk turning my camera on as well and just seeing if anything happens. Hopefully we'll all still stay in place.
We there? Yay. So I've shared the handout there with all of these resources on there, and they are time. Yeah, that was really helpful, Laura.
Thank you. I mean, I know a lot of it sounds it can sound quite obvious, but I think, yeah, sometimes it is going back to basics and just really tuning in with ourselves. I think, you know, out of all of the careers work I've done now, you know, probably been doing it for 10 years in total, sort of when I was a lawyer, but also now, that's the message that we give the most often. It's really knowing who you are and valuing that, and that is the cornerstone of everything else, and sort of being more happier and more confident in the workplace. So
yeah, definitely. Is there an email address that you're happy to share for people to contact you if they have any questions after the session?
Yeah, sure. So I'm going to pop that in the chat now.
Thank you.
It's working, and I will also share. I don't know if people here use LinkedIn, but I'm also happy to share that too.
That's good.
Oh, we have a question.
Well,
Thank you. That is a great question. Thank you, Elizabeth. I think I would always check with the interviewer, but I think if you've let them know before and saying, you know, sometimes I can get nervous in interviews, I'd really like to take prompt cards, would that be okay? I would definitely do that. And I mean, I don't know how it would feel to you to ask that question of an interviewer. I know lots of people feel like they either can't do that or they're worried about how it would come across. But I think at that stage, I think it's a perfectly reasonable question to ask. And I think it's, as long as what I found with recruiters, as long as they know why you're doing it and that you have them, then most are okay with that. Because what it does show is that you really care, you've done a lot of preparation, and you want to do your best. So I think if it's a combination of those things, definitely. Another question I've had a lot from students recently, because they're doing online interviews, is should they have sort of prompt cards and their application next to them when they're online? Again, I think it can be a really, really great resource. But it can be a good idea, again, to let the interviewer know, just because when you're online, if you're looking down often, they might be thinking that, you know, you're not building rapport, or there's a reason, you know. So again, it's being okay with why you need to do it, and letting interviewers know, I think, why you're doing it as well. And again, that's really important for them to know, because I think most people will be have sympathy and empathy for that, because I expect most people in the room in an interview, you're going to have at least one introvert who will totally understand why that's happening. So yes is the short answer, but I would let them know that that's what you're planning on doing.
I quite like that, because it then shows that you're aware of how you might be affected in that situation, and you've got a plan to deal with it. And it shows how resourceful you are. When I do presentations, I tend to take prompt cards, and I often take like an entire copy of the speech as well. And I just leave it on the side, like, just in case I need it. It's just a little backup. Never ever will I touch it, but it's there just in case.
And it's amazing, you know, I think before I got into the Oxford community, because I just had this, everyone at Oxford knows what they're doing and they're all, you know, huge brains, and, you know, and that's all true. But the amount of lecturers who will give lectures just reading from a pre-prepared speech. And I was like, wow, but they're doing what they need to do to get through it. So it's this thing as well that we presume, you know, everyone is better than us, or people in certain positions are completely confident in what they do. And I've seen, you know, these really sort of high-performing academics, but they will read from a sheet because they don't feel comfortable sort of freestyling it. And I think that's just really helpful to know, because it's just different styles, and it's always, the best presenters will always work with what's best for them rather than trying to emulate somebody else, I think.
I liked what you were saying before we came on air as well, where you were talking about you did that interview and you stayed sat down because that's what felt best for you. And I had a situation where we were doing like a Dragon's Den style interview for the SSE startup course that Stacey and I met on. And I think I was the only one that stood up for the interview. And they were really surprised that I was doing it. But I need to like power pose. I need to feel confident.
I've got, and some of my colleagues, they will do things like, you know, who again, I thought were just super confident. They need to walk around when they're presenting, because that takes away their nerves. They need to move and they need to sort of flow as they're talking. And again, it's we all resource ourselves in different ways, and it's just knowing what we need, you know. It's that, and I say the phrase tuning in to ourselves over and over again, but however you can do that, it is the most important thing. Know what you need and value it. super important.
Absolutely.
Okay, I was going to give my LinkedIn profile as well. So
Thank you very much.
But yeah, please, if anyone does have any questions, please do email me, because it's great for me to know the kinds of things that are happening as well. And I really value hearing from people. So thank you for input.
You're also in the Quiet community as well. So if people want to direct message you there, that's a good way to get in touch too.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, I just remembered as well that other resource. So, am I still online or is it going? I've got a message.
She's about to disappear.
I think I'm still here. Can you still hear me?
Yes, for a minute.
Oh, I think. I think it's.
Okay, so with that, we will finish there.
I think she's gone.
She lasted till the end today. That was brilliant.
That's good.
Okay, thank you everyone for joining us, and look forward to seeing you next week. You'll be redirected to the sign up page for next week's session now. Okay, take care. Bye.
Thanks for coming.